Most people are trapped by the belief that they need to have everything figured out before they can take a single meaningful step. They think they need the full blueprint, the complete set of instructions, a perfect plan that accounts for every possible variable. And so they wait. They wait for the moment when the unknown disappears, for when the road is fully lit from beginning to end. That moment never comes. Because life, by its nature, is shrouded in uncertainty. There will always be turns you cannot see, conditions you cannot predict, and obstacles you could never have planned for. The truth is, you don't need to know every step. You need to know the direction. That's it. You need clarity of purpose, not a step-by-step manual. The irony is that the plan you think will give you confidence is the very thing keeping you from moving. Because the plan will always be incomplete, and your mind will use that incompleteness as an excuse to delay. Purpose, deep, crystal clear purpose, doesn't require the whole map. It demands that you know why you're going somewhere, not every detail of how you'll get there. Think about this. If you were lost in the wilderness and you could see a mountain in the distance, you wouldn't need a GPS route to start walking toward it. You would orient yourself in that direction and begin. Step by step, the terrain would reveal itself, sometimes rocky, sometimes smooth, sometimes blocked entirely. You'd adjust. You'd learn the path by taking it. And as you move, you discover things no pre-made plan could have predicted. This is where people get stuck. They mistake the absence of a complete plan for the absence of readiness. But readiness is not about having every answer. It's about having the courage to begin with the answers you already hold, the most important of which is your purpose. When you know what you're aiming at, what truly matters, you can tolerate not knowing every twist and turn ahead. Without purpose, no amount of planning will save you from hesitation. Here's the danger of over-planning. You start to believe that the plan is reality. You create a mental structure so rigid that when life inevitably changes, you feel betrayed, disoriented, even paralyzed. Plans are only as good as the assumptions they're built on, and your assumptions are always incomplete. That's why the most successful people are not those who follow a flawless plan, but those who adapt relentlessly because their purpose is non-negotiable. They can alter the how endlessly because they are committed to the why. Consider the people who built great companies, movements, or works of art. Ask them if they followed their original plan exactly. You'll find their path was a mess of wrong turns, improvisations, and moments of sheer uncertainty. What kept them moving was not the accuracy of their initial roadmap. It was the clarity of their intention. They knew what they stood for, what they were willing to work for, and what they refused to compromise on. Purpose is the compass. Without it, even the best plan will leave you wandering in circles. With it, even a crude path becomes navigable. You might have to change routes 100 times, but you won't lose yourself. And that's the difference between those who make progress and those who get stuck. They choose movement with faith in their destination over paralysis in search of a perfect route. There's a psychological truth here too. We crave certainty because it makes us feel safe. The human brain is wired to minimize risk and avoid the unknown. So the idea of having a detailed plan feels comforting. It quiets the anxiety that comes from uncertainty. But there's a hidden cost to that comfort. It robs you of the willingness to take the imperfect, uncertain action that actually creates change. Comfort tricks you into thinking preparation is progress. It isn't. The act of moving toward a purpose, even without certainty, is what produces momentum and clarity. And clarity doesn't come before you start. It comes because you start. The first step reveals the second. The second step reveals the third. If you try to reverse that process, waiting for the third before you take the first, you'll be waiting forever. Purpose is what allows you to start in the dark, trusting that the light will grow as you move. Now, this isn't an argument against thinking ahead. Planning has value, but it should serve your purpose, not replace it. A plan is a tool, not a master. The problem is when the plan becomes the gatekeeper to your action. When you refuse to act until it's perfect. You will never have a perfect plan. Life changes too quickly for that. What you can have is a perfect commitment to your purpose, and that's infinitely more powerful. Faith, in this context, is the willingness to walk forward when you can't see the whole way. It's the trust that you will meet each challenge as it comes. It's not blind, it's built on the knowledge that you've survived challenges before, and that your purpose is worth the risk. And here's the strange thing, the more you act with that kind of faith, the more the world responds. Opportunities appear that would have stayed hidden had you waited. People come into your life who would never have crossed your path if you'd stayed still. And you start to realize that the map you were waiting for could never have accounted for these variables, because they didn't exist until you started moving. The journey itself creates the conditions that make success possible. Purpose fuels the journey. Faith keeps you on it when you can't see the next bend. So the real question is not, do you have the plan? It's, do you have the purpose and the faith to start without one? Because if you do, you'll learn what every great builder, thinker, and creator has learned: the path reveals itself to the one who walks it. Don't spend your life waiting for the fog to lift before you take your first step. Start moving toward the thing that matters most to you. Let the uncertainty be part of the adventure. Trust that you'll know enough for the next step when it comes. Because the road to your destination is not built in advance. It's built beneath your feet as you walk. And if you must choose between a perfect plan and an unshakable purpose, choose the purpose. The plan can change 1,000 times. The purpose should never change at all. Life is not a straight line. It's a series of unpredictable turns, sudden detours, and stretches of road that disappear into complete darkness. We like to imagine that we can control it all, that if we work hard enough on our strategies, on our schedules, on our contingencies, we can outsmart uncertainty. But no matter how prepared you think you are, the moment will come when the plan falls apart. Not because you did something wrong, but because the world doesn't owe you predictability. When that moment comes, something deeper than logic has to carry you. Logic has its place. It can map the terrain, weigh probabilities, help you see patterns. But in the thick of real uncertainty, when the data is incomplete, when the options are unclear, when the cost of standing still is rising by the second, logic alone will leave you frozen. What keeps you moving is faith. And I don't mean faith in some vague, wishful sense, hoping everything will magically work out without effort. That's not faith, that's fantasy. Real faith is the commitment to act without complete evidence, grounded in the belief that you will figure it out as you go, and that the destination is worth the risk of not knowing the whole way. It's what allows you to act when the situation is uncertain, when your resources are limited, and when fear is trying to convince you to retreat. This kind of faith is not passive, it's active. It demands courage, it demands resilience. It demands that you bet on yourself before you have every reason to believe you can win. And here's the paradox: the moments that most require faith are the very moments when it feels most unreasonable to have it. You're standing in front of a challenge you don't fully understand, with tools you're not sure will work, in conditions you didn't plan for. Everything in you wants to wait for clarity. Faith is choosing to move anyway. Think of it like this: uncertainty is a storm. Plans are like paper maps. They're useful until the rain hits. Once the storm comes, the map gets soaked and the ink runs, and suddenly you're left with smudges where your path used to be. If all you have is the map, you're lost. But if you have faith, if you have the inner conviction that you can navigate the storm itself, you keep moving. You improvise, you adapt. And often, you end up finding routes you never would have discovered if the map had worked. There's a psychological layer here that's important to understand. The human mind equates uncertainty with danger. Our nervous systems evolved to treat the unknown as a threat, because for most of human history, it often was. That's why so many people freeze when faced with ambiguity. The fear is not irrational, it's ancient. But in modern life, that same instinct often works against us. Most of the challenges you face today will not kill you, but your brain doesn't fully distinguish between physical danger and the uncertainty of a career move, a relationship decision, or a creative risk. The fear feels the same. Faith is how you override that ancient wiring. It's the conscious choice to step forward despite the alarm bells in your head. It doesn't silence the fear. It just refuses to let the fear dictate the outcome. And once you've done it a few times, something changes inside you. You stop seeing uncertainty as a void to be avoided, and you start seeing it as a space filled with possibility. The irony is that many of the best things in life, love, opportunity, breakthrough ideas, emerge from the spaces you cannot predict. If you try to live only in certainty, you cut yourself off from the very conditions that produce growth. Faith is what lets you enter those conditions willingly. I've seen people with perfect plans crumble the moment things went sideways because their sense of control was tied entirely to their plan working. I've also seen people with almost no resources and no clear roadmap thrive because their sense of control was tied to their ability to adapt and persist. That difference is not about intelligence or skill, it's about where they placed their trust. The first group trusted their plan, the second group trusted themselves. When you have faith in yourself, your resourcefulness, your persistence, your ability to learn under pressure, you can survive the collapse of any single plan. More than that, you can use that collapse as a turning point. Because every time you keep moving through uncertainty, you're not just surviving, you're building the very capabilities that make you more resilient in the future. And here's the deeper truth. The world has always been uncertain. The idea that stability is the norm is a myth. Life is change, and change is by definition unpredictable. The most dangerous thing you can do is build a mindset that depends on certainty to function. Because the moment certainty vanishes, and it will, you're at the mercy of circumstances. Faith, on the other hand, is portable. It works in any environment, in any storm, under any condition. This is why some people can walk into situations they've never experienced before and still make progress. They're not looking for guarantees. They're looking for the next step. Faith gives them the confidence to take that step, even if the ground feels unstable. And when they take enough of those steps, they create stability where there was none before. It's important to be clear here. Faith is not a replacement for action. It's the fuel for it. Without action, faith is just sentiment. But with action, faith becomes a force. It's what gets you out of bed when the odds look bad. It's what keeps you building when the results are slow. It's what makes you stand up again after the setback that should have ended you. In fact, the most transformative opportunities you'll ever encounter will not come with certainty. They will arrive disguised as risk, wrapped in the unknown, and they will test whether your faith is real or just theoretical. The people who seize those moments are not the ones who had all the facts. They're the ones who decided to move without them. So, the challenge I'll put to you is simply stop waiting for certainty to give you permission to act. Start cultivating the kind of faith that makes action possible without it. Remind yourself of the times you faced the unknown and came out stronger. Build a mental library of your own resilience so that when the next wave of uncertainty hits, you can meet it with the memory that you've navigated storms before. Because the truth is, uncertainty is not going away. But neither is your capacity to grow, to adapt, to find your way forward. Faith is the engine that keeps that capacity alive. And in a world where the only constant is change, that engine is worth more than any plan you could write. When the road ahead disappears into the fog, don't stop. Don't wait for it to clear. Keep walking. Because faith is not about knowing the way. It's about knowing you'll make it. No matter what way you take, we tend to imagine opportunity as something we find, as though it's sitting out there waiting for us to stumble upon it. But in reality, most of the opportunities that shape your life don't exist until you move. They're not lying in wait like treasures on a map. They're created through the very act of stepping forward without knowing exactly where you're going. That's the paradox most people miss. The door you're looking for doesn't appear until you're already walking toward a wall. And you can't plan for a door you don't yet know exists. Which means that if you insist on having certainty before you act, you'll never reach the point where opportunity has a chance to materialize. Faith-driven action is what builds the path where there was no path. Think about the most pivotal moments in your life. The friendships that shaped you. The jobs that changed your trajectory. The insights that altered your perspective. How many of them were the result of a carefully executed plan? And how many came as a result of saying yes to something uncertain, something you couldn't fully predict or control? If you're honest, most of them came from the second category. Life is alive. It's not a static puzzle to be solved. It's a living system that responds to movement. The moment you act with faith, moving toward what matters to you without full clarity, the environment begins to change in response. New people notice you. New situations intersect your path. New skills emerge in you because you're forced to adapt. None of these things could be accounted for in advance. This is why action matters more than perfect preparation. You could sit at home with the most brilliant strategy in the world, but if you never move, the universe has nothing to respond to. It's like shouting into a canyon. You only hear the echo after you speak. Until you move, the echo doesn't exist. The danger is that many people misunderstand what action and faith looks like. They think it means recklessly charging forward without thought or preparation. But it's not recklessness. It's intentional movement without complete information. It's starting with what you have, where you are, and trusting that the process will provide what you need next. Here's what often happens the moment you take a step forward. You encounter challenges you didn't foresee. And it's tempting to think of these as signs that you made a mistake. But more often than not, those challenges are the very catalysts that force you to grow in ways that make the bigger opportunities possible. In hindsight, you realize the difficulty wasn't an obstacle. It was a hidden training ground. Plans tend to aim for the shortest, cleanest route. Faith-driven action often takes you through the rough, winding one. And while it's harder, it's richer, because along that path you meet the people, develop the skills, and gain the experiences that prepare you for a future you couldn't have imagined when you started. That's why so many successful people look back and say, "I never saw this coming." They didn't get here by predicting everything. They got here by moving when they couldn't predict anything. There's a psychological reason why this works. Action changes not just your circumstances, but you. The moment you begin moving, you start building momentum. You gather feedback from the environment. You notice patterns you couldn't see from a standstill. You refine your instincts, and as you change, your capacity to recognize and seize opportunity expands. This creates a loop. Faith fuels action, action fuels growth, growth fuels opportunity, and opportunity fuels deeper faith. The opposite is also true. Inaction shrinks your vision. When you wait for everything to be perfect, your world becomes smaller, more controlled, more predictable, but also more limited. You stop bumping into the unknown, and as a result, you stop discovering the unexpected gifts it carries. One of the most dangerous mindsets you can adopt is the belief that the biggest opportunities in your life will knock on your door fully formed. They won't. They'll come disguised as uncertainty. They'll come dressed up as extra work, or as an idea that feels too risky, or as a chance meeting with someone you could easily overlook. And you'll only recognize them if you're already in motion, if your life is already oriented toward purpose and fueled by faith. The people who change their lives aren't the ones who waited for the perfect moment. They're the ones who created moments by moving. They didn't always know where they were going, but they knew that standing still was the surest way to go nowhere. And so they stepped out again and again until the doors began to open, not because fate handed them over, but because their footsteps led them to them. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it doesn't require special circumstances. You don't have to be in the right industry, the right city, or the right network to start. You start where you are with what you have, and you trust that the act of starting will connect you to what you need next. That's not name, that's how growth works. Seeds don't wait for perfect weather before sprouting. They break through the soil into uncertainty. And it's that very act that connects them to sunlight. And yes, sometimes you'll take a step, and nothing will happen immediately. That's part of the process too. Faith isn't a vending machine. You don't put in one act of courage and instantly receive a reward. Often, it's a series of steps taken in trust that eventually create the tipping point. And when it happens, it will feel like it came out of nowhere, even though in reality, it was the result of everything you've been doing in the unseen. That's why you can't measure the value of a step solely by its immediate results. Some of the most important moves you'll ever make will look insignificant in the moment, but will ripple into massive changes years down the line. And the only way to access those kinds of moments is to move now, not when you think you have every detail in place. So if there's something you feel drawn to, an idea, a project, a relationship, a risk, don't let the absence of a perfect plan hold you back. Step into it. Trust that the act of moving will reveal the next step. Trust that even the wrong turns will teach you something essential. And trust that the biggest opportunities are not behind the locked door of certainty. They're waiting for you just past the edge of what you can see. Because the truth is, life doesn't reward those who stand still and wait for permission. It rewards those who move in faith, creating doors where there were only walls and discovering paths no plan could have ever predicted. People think they need the perfect plan before they can move forward. They believe if they could just see the entire path, every twist and turn, then they'd finally have the confidence to act. But the world doesn't work like that. You will never have perfect clarity before you start. The road only becomes visible when you walk it. The irony is that the need for a flawless plan is what keeps people from taking the very steps that would give them the clarity they're waiting for. What you truly need is not the full map, it's the compass. You need to know what you're aiming at. That's clarity of purpose. Without it, even the most detailed plan won't stop you from getting lost. With it, you can navigate without knowing every detail. It's the difference between staring at a paper map in a safe room and actually stepping out into the wilderness with a direction in mind. The map feels safe, but the wilderness is where you actually make progress. This is where faith comes in. Because purpose alone isn't enough when the path is unpredictable, and it will be unpredictable. Faith is the engine that keeps you moving when the terrain changes, when the conditions turn against you, when the plan falls apart. Without it, the moment uncertainty rises, you'll stop. You'll retreat. You'll convince yourself that the unknown is too dangerous. But faith lets you act without having the full picture. It's not blind. It's built on the belief that you can meet challenges as they come, that you can adapt, and that the destination is worth the risk of not knowing exactly how you'll get there. Uncertainty is unavoidable. You can try to plan it away, but life will throw variables you couldn't have accounted for. Plans are fragile, faith is resilient. Faith can survive broken strategies, unexpected setbacks, and abrupt changes because it's not tied to the method, it's tied to the mission. If you have that, you can change the how as many times as needed without losing the why. And here's the fascinating thing. When you act from faith, you don't just survive uncertainty. You create opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. We often imagine opportunity as something waiting for us to find it. But most of the time, it doesn't exist until we move. The act of stepping forward creates intersections, moments where people, resources, and ideas meet you along the way. These intersections cannot be predicted in advance. They're invisible from where you're standing now. Only movement makes them visible. Think about the most important moments in your life. Relationships you've built, jobs you've landed, insights that changed you. How many of them came because you followed a perfectly laid out plan? And how many came because you took a chance on something uncertain? If you're honest, most of the turning points happened after a leap, not before it. Faith-driven action forces you into situations that grow you. It pushes you to develop skills, make connections, and see possibilities you couldn't have imagined beforehand. The very act of movement changes your environment and changes you. You begin to see more, you begin to think differently, and because of that, you begin to spot opportunities that were always there but were invisible to the person you used to be. This is why so many people look back and say, "I never saw this coming." They couldn't have seen it, because the version of themselves who could recognize it didn't exist until they started walking the path. Plans can only be built on what you know now. Faith allows you to grow into the person who will know more later. Of course, this kind of action feels risky. Your brain is wired to equate uncertainty with danger. For most of human history, the unknown was a threat. It could kill you. That's why the impulse to wait for safety feels so strong. But in modern life, that same impulse often keeps us from the very experiences that make us stronger. Faith is what overrides that impulse. It's the deliberate choice to step forward even while fear whispers that you shouldn't. And the more you do it, the less intimidating the unknown becomes. When you live this way, you stop expecting certainty to hand you your future. You stop waiting for the right time. You start creating the right time through action. And that's when the world starts responding differently to you. People notice momentum. They're drawn to those who move with conviction. Resources flow toward action, not hesitation. Now, this doesn't mean recklessness. It doesn't mean charging blindly into everything without thought. It means calculated courage, starting with what you have, knowing it isn't enough, and trusting that the rest will come in the process. Sometimes that trust will be rewarded immediately. Sometimes it will be rewarded years later, in ways you couldn't possibly foresee. But the reward always comes, because the act of moving is never wasted. Even the wrong turns aren't really wrong. They train you. They sharpen your instincts. They connect you to people and ideas you never would have met otherwise. And in the long run, those so-called wrong turns often become the critical parts of your story. The experiences that gave you the resilience and creativity to seize the bigger opportunities when they appeared. So the choice is simple: live waiting for perfect clarity, or live creating clarity through action. One keeps you safe but small. The other exposes you to risk but also to growth. And the truth is, safety is an illusion anyway. Life will find ways to challenge you whether you act or not. If you're going to face uncertainty no matter what, you might as well face it while moving towards something that matters. Because you don't need the perfect plan. You need the purpose that points you forward. You need the faith that keeps you moving when you can't see the whole way. And you need the courage to take the step that might lead to something far greater than anything you could have predicted. The path is not waiting for you to find it. It's waiting for you to create it. And it will only appear under your feet if you have the faith to walk where you cannot yet see.